that's better. Sorry about that, I've been spending too much time in the observatory. Anyways, today we're reviewing Project Hail Mary. Project Hail Mary was written by Andy Weir and published on May 4th, 2021, which is last year as of this video going up. Haha, Star Wars Day. And since it is so very recent, I am going to add a spoiler warning for those who would like to read it. My dad has been pestering me to read this book for months, and he hasn't steered me wrong in the past, so let's take a look and see what we got for this piece of science fiction. Now, normally in a science fiction novel review, this is where I talk about the world. Well, here's the thing. Well, yes, it is science fiction. It doesn't necessarily take place in the future. Okay, well, debatably it does. But it doesn't take place on Earth. Kind of. The writing style for this novel is very unique, as the main protagonist has amnesia and is slowly but surely regaining his memories through flashbacks sprinkled throughout the story. The flashbacks take place on Earth, likely in the present day or the near future, since there are mentions of smartphones, Siri, Alexa, etc. The current story takes place in space, near the star Tau Ceti. Now, Tau Ceti is an actual star located in the constellation Cetus. The star itself is similar to the Sun, but it only has about 78% of the Sun's mass. It is also located about 12 light years away from the solar system, so it's pretty close. And this star also has planets revolving around it. Of course, we don't know a whole lot about these planets other than that they might be in a habitable zone. There's a fascinating process to learn about exoplanets revolving around other stars. I recommend searching it up whenever you can. It's not surprising that someone would take the time to write a story centered around other solar systems that we know exist. Heck, it might be fun. I should try that at some point. Anyways, be ready for science lessons sprinkled about the story because there is a lot of science. As I mentioned before, the story begins with the protagonist waking up from a coma with no memory of his identity or why he's in this room. He deduces what the heck is going on from studying the room and realizing that he had two other crewmates with him who are now dead, and through flashbacks he learns his name is Dr. Ryland Grace, a junior high school science teacher and a former molecular biologist. He's a pretty cool teacher too. Now, I'm not going to summarize all the flashbacks in one sitting, but I will summarize most of them and then bring up the important stuff when necessary. So Ryland learns that a global dimming effect is happening because of the appearance of a bright line between the Sun and Venus, which is known as the Petrova line. Now the rate of dimming is going so fast that within about 30 years there will be an ice age so bad it could cause mass extinction. Now, of course, a space probe is sent to look at the Petrova line and it finds little microbes. Living microbes. Because of the seriousness of the situation, the world's governments come together and give a former ESA, that stands for European Space Agency, administrator named Eva Stratt full authority and legal immunity to pull people together and solve the problem. So, after doing an abundance of research, Stratt comes across a paper written by Ryland about how the Goldilocks zone is not the only way for life to exist. In the paper, he writes that there are probably some alien species that don't require water to survive. So Stratt goes to Ryland while he's at work and tells him to come with her to look at the microbes. After doing some tests on the microbes, he realizes that they are in fact composed of water molecules, hydrogen and oxygen, and he names them astrophage, since it consumes energy from the sun and other stars. He also finds out that astrophage reproduces in carbon dioxide, which is very abundant on Venus. Other scientists after Ryland discover how to use the astrophage as rocket fuel, since the microbes are able to produce high quantities of energy. Upon further research in space, it is discovered that astrophage infects and is dimming a bunch of stars close to the sun, except one. That star is Tau Ceti. A project is put together to get a qualified group of people to travel aboard an astrophage-fueled spaceship called the Hail Mary, which will travel to Tau Ceti and send data back to Earth via mini-spaceships to find out how to solve the astrophage problem. However, due to the shortage of time and the lack of proper resources, there's only enough fuel and resources for a one-way trip to Tau Ceti, meaning the people going on the Hail Mary won't be coming back. The crew has to travel while in a coma, so like the hypersleep in your average science fiction film, and to avoid psychiatric problems, Stratt and many other scientists put together a list of people who have a coma-resistant gene and get them all ready to go up into space. Now, Ryland regains these memories over time. He also relearns the identity of his two dead crewmates and gives them a burial in space. Now he is alone with the robot hands who make sure he's healthy. But, while Ryland is examining Tau Ceti's Petrova line, he discovers another spaceship right next to him. That's right, more aliens. Through an interesting form of communication, the aliens in the spaceship, which Ryland dubs the Blip A, let him know that they are from the system revolving around the star 40 Eridani, which is also an actual star in the Eridanus constellation. They specifically live on a planet closest to the star, which Ryland has dubbed Arid. Now, through other communication, Ryland finally gets to meet the lone resident of the spaceship. The name of the alien is actually a collection of notes in the Iridian language, but Ryland dubs him Rocky due to his rock-like arachnid appearance. Yes, Rocky is a giant spider. And now what about the other aliens? There were other aliens, but they all got radiation sickness since their planet's atmosphere is so thick it protects them from the radiation of Eridani, so they never really evolved radiation resistance. Because Rocky is an engineer and worked so close to astrophage, which also protects against radiation, he was the lone survivor. Now let me give you some interesting things about the Iridian species. 1, they do not have eyes. They rely on sound, as there is no light that gets through to the planet's surface as the atmosphere is so thick. Plus, these creatures breathe ammonia, and the gravitational pull they live in is 29 times that of Earth's. I know this is all very, very specific, but I'm trying to make a point here that Rocky cannot go into Ryland's ship without dying, and vice versa. Now, Rocky has been a Tau Ceti for 40 Earth years, which isn't really an issue since the Iridian species have a much longer lifespan than humans do, and Arid has a lot more time than Earth does in terms of survival. Since Rocky has been here for that long, he's been able to do a lot of studying in terms of astrophage. So yes, the two are both here for the same reason and learn to communicate and work together. The two follow the Petrova line and see that it stops at the third planet away from Tau Ceti. Ryland collects some samples from the planet, which nearly costs both of them their lives, as Rocky had to save Ryland from being crushed to death thanks to the planet's gravitational pull, and finds out that astrophage has a predator, which Ryland dubs Talmiba. Now, no problems, right? The solution is found! We can all go home! But there is a problem. Apparently, the Talmiba escaped and got into the fuel, which is made of astrophage. Rocky is able to provide some fuel for the Hail Mary and restore power, but now they gotta be careful. Upon further research when things relax, Ryland learns that nitrogen is very poisonous to Talmiba, which makes it impossible for the Talmiba to reproduce and consume the astrophage on Venus, which is 3.5% nitrogen, or 3-World, the planet where the astrophage is going in the Eridani system, which is 8% nitrogen. Well, this is a problem. I have another science lesson. So, you may already know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Antibiotics help kill off diseases. However, with enough exposure to these antibiotics, the disease will begin to evolve a resistance to the antibiotic and make things worse. This is why a lot of medicines from back then that worked wonders then don't really do a whole lot nowadays. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yes, this is what Ryland does. He starts exposing Talmiba to nitrogen little by little, and yes, it eventually evolves to resist enough nitrogen to survive on both planets. Well, Rocky gets some Talmiba, Ryland gets some, and then they part ways. All is good, right? Nope! Funny thing about evolution, it doesn't care what you think. Well, yes, the Talmiba are resistant to that much nitrogen. They also now have the ability to hide between molecules and escape their containers. They literally learn to hide from nitrogen. Now, see, here's the thing about solid containers. Solids are actually just a bunch of molecules vibrating super duper close together. They're not exactly touching. So yes, the Talmiba got out again. The containers used for Talmiba were made out of a metal called xenonite that Rocky had. Ryland is able to contain the Talmiba in other containers since xenonite is no longer an option, but Rocky doesn't know this, and his ship is made out of xenonite. We have a problem. Now, at some point before this time, we learn that while Ryland does have the gene to prevent problems in a coma, he did not volunteer for the Hail Mary mission. In fact, he insisted on not going. There were 2 others who were going to be the science experts to go with the crew, but they died in an accident. Ryland was the only option, and he was forced into the mission kicking and screaming. How'd they do it? Well, they knocked him out and gave him a drug that gave him brief amnesia so that by the time he does fully remember everything that happened, it'll be too late. So, Ryland has a choice to make here. He could go home and be hailed a hero since he now has enough fuel and food to go home, or he could go save Rocky and use his fuel and food to get to Arid while sending the mini spaceships with Talmiba to Earth. He decides against all instinct to save Rocky. Ryland does save Rocky, but he's out of food until Rocky suggests that Ryland eat Talmiba until they make it to Arid, where the Iridian scientists will make a habitable living space for Ryland. And that's exactly what happens. The Talmiba are sent to Three World, and Eridani is back to the way it was. The Hail Mary is still operational, and with the Iridian technology, they are able to provide fuel and food for Ryland to go home. But Ryland doesn't want to go home. He had already been on Arid for so long that it wouldn't be worth it. Plus, he has had a nice life here, teaching Iridian children science. What about Earth? Did the Talmiba make it? Well, it did. We aren't told the details of what happened, but it's implied that the scientists got together, figured out what to do with the Talmiba, and sent them over to Venus. The end. Now, that was a long summary. There's actually so much more contained in this book, and the majority of it is science explaining why certain things happen the way they do. It's really fascinating if you like that. Anyways, let's get to the analysis. Now, unlike most science fiction novels and short stories, I don't get the same feeling of warning and foreboding I got with books like The Giver and 1984. I'd say this was more like Ready Player One. The warning was there in a way, but it was hidden beneath all of the fun things going on in the story. I still enjoyed the ride, don't get me wrong, but that foreboding feeling isn't there. Sure, it's there in some of the intense moments, but that's normal. If I had to guess, the warning would likely be to use whatever resources and knowledge you have to help others, or you'll regret it later in life. That's just my guess, though. I'm sure a lot of you would have different ideas and interpretations of what's going on. Now, what I want to talk about right now is the writing style. I love it. It really draws you in, and it's entertaining. Seriously, I think this would actually get someone to start reading if it was given to them. Also, the characters are fantastic. I like that Ryland wasn't some brave explorer doing this for the good of mankind at the start. While yes, he was forced into this, he still did the right thing. He is mad when he figures out what actually happened, but he's not going to murder an entire species out of spite. Overall, I strongly recommend this book. It's entertaining, it has funny moments, and the ending is satisfying. While I could see some people not liking the ending, I liked it. Plus, I also enjoyed all the scientific explanations. It really helped me understand what was going on and why. The age recommendation I'd give for this book is 16 and up. While the main focus is on saving the planet by eradicating the astrophage, there are a few graphic moments and some language in the book, plus some knowledge on Iridians and their biology that might make younger readers uncomfortable. Also, the book starts a little slow and contains some scientific terms that you might have to look up. But I can tell you this now, when it picks up in story, it is fantastic! That was Project Hail Mary. Thank you for listening to me talk about it. I really had a fun time reading it. I'd actually recommend you listen to the audiobook, as it has audio effects for the Iridian language that help immerse you more into the story. But if that's not your style, that's fine. As long as you're reading it, I'll be happy. Thanks for watching!